What time is it? It's nation time.
Greetings and welcome to the AfterWords program. My name is Bible Confense Chike, your host, and I'm joined today by Reverend Naredi, this week's preacher of our sermon, Embrace Home, Honoring Our Mission Eternally. Welcome to the AfterWords program, Reverend Naredi, and thank you for today's sermon.
Greetings, and thank you for having me. I'm well, and I hope you are too.
It is a plum-pleasing pleasure. You're very welcome. The scripture for today's sermon is from Matthew, the 10th book, verse 8. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely we have received, freely we give. For me, your sermon is a call to action. You challenge us to teach, preach, and heal as the Black Messiah did in his training of the 12 disciples. He challenged them and trained them to do that. And for me, this resonates as a very active Christian faith, which commands the followers to be active, not passive, which is, for me, more akin to what mainstream Christianity is. Am I on point with that? Is there a distinction between the two? And if there is, could you elaborate?
Yes, there is a distinction between the two. And at least here and in this country and in my own personal experience, there are a number of churches who teach that more passive Christianity, as you describe it, where most of the responsibility falls upon God to act upon the world. And that kind of Christianity, while it is true that God is all powerful, it robs believers of agency in effectuating change in their own lives. And it runs a bit contrary to what we read in the New Testament about the life and times of the Black Messiah. And that in reading the scriptures and taking them to heart, what we know is that Jesus handpicked 12 individuals to follow him, and they did. And during a 3-year period, which represents the active time of Jesus's ministry, they were able to observe him as he ministered to people, and they also received teaching and instruction from him as well. And as his ministry came to an end, his disciples were given a charge, and that was to go out and do the things that they had watched him do and to teach the things that he had taught them, because that is what people need. They need guidance and help in order to change. And it also tells us that when we choose to follow God, that we also have that same call to action, that our embracing a life of Christian service is not just for our own personal benefit, but it is for the sake of being able to help someone else on their journey.
Thank you for that. You mentioned, you used the analogy, I think, you say that our lives are a sermon. Could you elaborate on that idea or that concept?
Well, I know a lot of times parents will say to children, and it's probably a generational thing, do what I say and not what I do. But the reality of it is that actions really do speak louder than words. And I don't mean to be trite or cliche about that, but we are wired as human beings to take in the things that we see and respond to stimuli in our environments. And so our lives being a sermon, when I talk about that in the message, it is the way we live on a day-to-day basis is what has the most impact and the greatest opportunity for not only us to change and grow, but to help people change and grow as well. You know, when we think about the great lions and lionesses in our history, people that we celebrate, like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, we celebrate those individuals because of what they did, not because of what they said. And so, as Christians, our lives and the way we treat each other, the way we live out our faith, that's the sermon, that's the message.
Okay, and you used the word generational in your response, but you also talked about generational curses in the sermon. Please explain what these generational curses are and why it's important that we break these.
Well, in my sermon, I pointed out the generational curse that the Black nation Israel was experiencing, because it was a generational curse when you think about it. If you start reading the Bible from Genesis all the way up until the time of the Black Messiah, you will see that there were these cycles where Israel would obey God and serve God, and they would be blessed as a result. And then they would turn away from God, and then they would experience adversity as a result. And it was a cycle that just seemed to repeat in almost an endless way. And when Jesus came, he came at a time when Israel was still being oppressed. They were in a cycle of oppression. And he came in order to help break that cycle. He came as a representative of God on earth to remind us that, first of all, we all have that spark of divinity inside of each of us. And we all have the ability to change. And my sermon was and is about a message to people about changing and living and serving in a way that blesses other people. And so with generational curses, the problem with generational curses is that they stagnate growth. If you are in a cycle that you inherited from your parents or from people who have had significant influence over your life, and you continue to repeat those patterns, then you're going to continue to get the same results. And this is not something that is otherworldly or a pie in the sky notion. There are studies that show, for example, a child who witnesses domestic violence in the home is at a greater likelihood of perpetuating that cycle of violence in their own adult relationships. And so it's important that when we find ourselves in a cycle that results in negative actions either upon us or what we bring upon other people, that we break them, because we can pass those things on as a curse. And it's difficult to break that cycle. You know, uh, my daddy drank, and so now I'm going to drink. And then my child is going to drink, and then their children are going to drink. And not just drinking, but drinking to excess. Or I'm a person that engages in certain risky behaviors, and my child sees that. And so then my child embraces that, intentionally or not, and then they find themselves repeating that cycle as adults and then passing it forward. So that's a generational curse. Even with the enslavement of our people, that whole experience of enslavement and the dehumanization of Black people still has effects even today, in that there are huge segments of our community that struggle with self-worth. and self-identity, because there have been generations upon generations where Black people were told that they were nothing, that they weren't even really fully human. And so when we look at what Jesus was teaching the 12, and as you read through his ministry, you see that he raised people who were dead. He healed people who were sick. He turned water into wine. Now, all of these stories are likely metaphors for a larger message, but the point is that his life's ministry, his sermon, was about helping people change, helping people to become closer to God and better connected to one another.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. And as we really kind of come to a close here, could you briefly explain how the best self theology and the theology and programs of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church can enable us to break these curses and ignite these, this is a quote from you, ignite the spiritual power within us to do this work?
Well, the Best Self movement within our fellowship encourages people to take a disciplined approach to changing from the inside out. And so it has to do with study. It has to do with also engagement through a variety of spiritual disciplines, like meditation, like fellowshipping and learning and growing in the context of a group. It happens when we allow other people to hold up a mirror to ourselves, and people who will support us in the slow, incremental process of becoming that best self.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a powerful sermon and an even more powerful and insightful conversation today. I'd like to also thank our viewers for tuning in, joining us today, and invite them to join us each and every week for our sermons on Sunday morning, offered through the Bila Kuta Ministries of the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And I'd like to invite them to continue to join us, and of course, stay with us for the AfterWords program, the discussion that follows. And I'd like to close by inviting our followers, our viewers, our listeners to heed your call, as well as the call of our patron saint, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will.
What time is it? It's nation time.